What's up, everybody? I'm Chad Anderson. This is More Than Mortgages. Why do are people so nervous or afraid about buying real estate in today's market? We're going to give you the top 3 reasons as to why people are hesitant. Maybe they think a little bit differently. Maybe they're gun shy from other reasons from their past. Maybe they're getting some different messages from people. We're going to break that down for you and give you the top 3 as to why people are not buying real estate as quickly today, because they're still buying, just maybe not as quickly, obviously, as they were before. So let's bring in our man here, Zack Jones. Welcome in, buddy. How you been? Merry
Thank you, man.
late
I'm
Christmas.
good. I'm
Yeah,
good. Thank you for the holiday wishes. It's awesome. We got through all that, and happy to spend a little bit of time.
Got through it. Yes.
Yeah. Right. Well, here comes the big new year too. It's not. It's never. Nothing is ever over in our business. It's just the next chapter. So happy to spend a few minutes on this topic this morning with you, especially this morning.
All right, so let's dive into it. To just give a little bit of a little prelude to what we're doing here. So we all know, we all see, Zach and I make fun of people who are constantly posting what we call fear mongering, where people are out there posting, oh my God, if you don't buy a house today, you're an idiot. If you don't do this today, what are you doing? You're missing out. You're doing this, marry the house, date the rate, date your something else. All these messages, and they get blurred. And we've really been trying to do some different things, such as go over the math, go over some of the reasoning. And we were talking about this the other day, 3 reasons that we came up with that seem to be the main points as to why people are not buying houses as quickly. There are still buyers out there. There are still people who want to get pre-approved. There are still people who want to buy. They're just waiting on the sidelines. But the top 3 reasons why people aren't buying right now. Why are people not buying at this moment? So first one, analysis paralysis. We get this one a lot in all avenues of our life. We see this all the time in different decisions that we have to make as adults over and over again. And to people's credit, this is obviously the largest purchase pretty much you'll ever make. Largest monetary purchase, biggest monetary decision you will probably ever have to make is right here. But then people they do T-charts almost, Zach, is the way I see it playing out in their minds. And they go pros, cons, old-fashioned T-chart. And when they do that, they just start going back and forth. And then they just get numb and they can't pull the trigger or make a decision. And a lot of times when that happens is people just say, screw it, I'm not doing anything. And that's where they leave.
It's easier, quite frankly, not to make major decisions. And so, there's this intrigue and this romance about looking at a new house and dreaming about the kitchen and the kids in the backyard and the swing set and making memories around the fireplace and, recently the Christmas tree. But when it gets right down to the brass tacks, and gosh, Chad, I mean, you got to think about this too. These numbers are so big. You think about somebody who is coming in and talking about buying their first house in a lot of markets in the United States. When you look at that number with all those zeros, it's $400,000 or $500,000 in a lot of markets, and that's $500,000 dang dollars, and you've never spent that much money in your life, and so it brings up all kinds of insecurity and fear, and I think that this idea that it's easier not to is one that we really have to focus on. And Chad, so think about this: how many people go in with the idea of buying something on Amazon, and you start scrolling through and you're looking at the reviews and you're looking at the prices and you're looking at the brand names and then you're looking at the off-brand Chinese imports, and they all kind of look the same and they've all got 4.3 stars or 4.5 stars, and then you look at the 0-star reviews and how many reviews there are, and suddenly you just close the app and you're not going to buy it, or you put something in one of your saved lists to remind you to go back in there and do it again, because you just don't want to think that much more about a set of walkie-talkies.
Yeah.
And then you start you apply that to houses, And the difference on the Amazon app between this walkie-talkie and that walkie-talkie was $3.17, and you got stuck on that. How are you ever going to buy a
Man, I
house?
feel attacked, Zach. I'm not gonna lie. I'm sitting here listening to you,
Thank
and I'm
you.
going, "Wait a minute, I'm that damn person." Wait, wait a minute, because
We all do it. We
we
all
do.
do it. So it's no wonder that people get stuck in this fear of over analyzing a particular property. Does it have a kitchen island or not have a kitchen island? Are there 3 steps or are there 4 steps leading up to the front porch? And is my mother going to be able to get up those stairs in 10 years? Not
Yeah.
right now. She's fine right now, but she's going to be 67 in 10 years, and she might not be able to walk up those steps for Christmas. It's crazy.
I do use this line, and I don't mean to call it a line as if I'm trying to sell you or trick you, but it's more just putting things in perspective for yourself. I do say this to people, and I say, look, when you start talking about 5 years, 10 years, even 3 years down the road, and I say, look backwards 5 years. Are you sitting today where you thought you were going to be 5 years ago?
Right.
Like, go back to 2018, almost 2019 now, and say, okay, in 5 years, this is what life's going to look like.
Wow.
Odds are maybe 2%,
No way.
is what it looks like to you. Job change, relocation, house change, kids change. You have good things happen in your life. Unfortunately, we all have bad things happen in our lives. There's just so many things that get thrown at you. There's no way to do that. But I'm with you. I do the same thing when we're just buying like office equipment, or when I'm buying a new camera, or when I'm buying, like you go through all these things, and I'm like, all right, well, this one's an off brand, but it's got good reviews. But did some online hacker sit there and do 50 fake reviews? Did AI generate 50 fake reviews to get me to buy that product?
Right.
And for me, it's not about the $2 difference. It's more like, well, if I buy it and I don't like it, I got to deal with shipping this thing back.
Yep.
I got to deal with the hassle of returning it. And that's what
Which
they
we
want me to
don't.
do. Yeah,
Right.
which we don't. That's what they're banking on. They'll get too busy. They
Right.
won't even return it, and you'll just keep going. So analysis paralysis, though. And
Well, but think about returning the product here. I'm interrupting you. You buy the wrong house, you have to move again,
oh,
and
you
it
can't.
costs you
Yeah,
tens of thousands of dollars in fees and
yeah,
commissions,
that's right.
and the time and the 2 weeks to get out. It's unbelievably
It is.
overwhelming. Don't want to make a mistake. I'm just not going to do it right now. Let's renew the lease and we'll figure this out later.
Yeah.
Right.
So look, taking a conservative approach is okay, but you also have to, at some point, know when a good decision is a good decision or an opportunity, and don't get handicapped by the analysis paralysis. That's kind of like, you ever heard the old joke about God and the guy in the river, where the guy's drowning, he prays to God, send me,
Right. He's in a
help me,
flood
help
and he's
me,
sitting
help
on
me.
top of the house. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, help me, help me, help me. And the guy with a rowboat comes by. Oh no, God's gonna take care of me. Guy with the helicopter comes by. That's
Yeah.
gonna take care of me. He drowns and dies, goes to heaven, and God's like, "You dummy! I sent you the rowboat and the helicopter. What are you doing
Yeah.
up here?" So, yeah. So it's interesting, because it is like, it's such a big purchase. Again, probably the biggest purchase you'll ever have in your life, and so it's a big deal. It's a big thing, and people still, even though it's been 15 years ish, people are still a little paralyzed from the previous crash. Or if they weren't involved in it, they hear stories about 15 years and the relevance of today in 2008,
Right.
which I disagree with, but that's what people talk about.
Yep.
So, it's a thing.
It's our
Um,
most recent trauma, right?
it
Yep.
is. It is.
But
And number two,
here's a
go ahead.
little, before you move off of that, here's a little psychological trick too, I think, to try to evaluate how inclined you are to get paralyzed by that, is look at these smaller decisions that you make. Look at how you shop online. Look at how you might make or not make a decision about buying a new lawnmower or whatever it is. Do I typically kind of freeze in the headlights about major decisions, and then ultimately not get what I want? I'm a strong starter, but I never finish. Is interesting insight. So there's some of Shakespeare's "Know thyself" in there somewhere,
Yeah.
to try to figure out that fear part.
Yeah, good point. Like, if you look back at history, do you typically go too conservative on big decisions and then regret your decision later? I mean, that's
Yeah,
a fair asking point, not to
guilty.
push you. Yeah, not to
Guilty.
push, but does it happen? Yeah, I'm more
Right.
of a I'm more somebody accused me one time, if you don't like singles and doubles, you like grand slams. Like, they're more fun. They're more fun. I'll tell you that. They're good, but they're also bad when you strike out 12
That's
times
right.
between the grand slams.
That's
So,
right. That's right.
all right. Also, number 3 is gonna correlate a lot with number 1 that we'll get to in just a moment. But let's take a look at number 2 here. And this one's very common. People focus too much on rates. The best way, you've all seen it. If you haven't by now, you're under a rock. But everybody has seen marry the house, date the rate. Everybody has seen, 384 million people have re-entered the housing market in the last 8 minutes. People have seen all these crazy things and memes and sayings and charts and whatever. And mostly coming from realtors or loan officers who are trying to push because they want to make a sale just like everyone else. But that doesn't mean they're wrong. That doesn't mean they're wrong in their messaging. It's just the delivery of the message to me is what sucks. But people do get too held up and focused on rates. The best way, and then you probably have some great analogies on this, Zach, but the best thing I can come up with is like in the stock market and in sports gambling. There's a thing where society as a whole, think about this. Society just as a complete economic balance. The majority have to be wrong for it to balance out. If everybody was right on the stock market, then guess what? Everybody would be millionaires and billionaires,
Right.
which then would make millionaires the middle class.
There's a majority loser and a minority winner in all
Every
of it,
time,
right?
and all
Yeah.
and all of it. And I think people fail to realize that a lot of times. The joke is out there of Vegas doesn't pay the electricity bill on winners. Like, well,
Right.
obviously, but then when you start thinking about it, where does that apply to a lot of things? And in sports gambling, it's called FTP, fade the public, meaning if a lot of people are on one team to win the game or cover the spread, then a lot of times the other team, and usually the underdog, ends up covering because people didn't expect it. They couldn't fathom that this would happen. They couldn't fathom the underdog could give them such a run. And that's where casinos and whatnot clean up and make money. And that's how they stay in their business. So that's the best I can say is like, hey, look, treat it as if such. If you can afford to buy a house, you can't focus on the interest rate. You focus on your affordability. If you can afford to buy the house, a lot of other people right now are sitting on the sidelines. So this is the perfect time to do it because if everybody was doing it, you wouldn't get this house price. So it's affordability and it's also doing what others aren't doing right now. And there's more people waiting on rates to come down than there are people buying right now with rates where they are.
Right. Well, and I kind of have a tendency to think about rates as it's like a lazy man's sales pitch, or maybe there's ignorance in there, but it's one of these simple things that we can focus on to measure a market. So if you don't really know anything about real estate and you don't really know about finance and you don't really know how to do some of the more sophisticated mathematical calculations that are involved in real estate, which involve the biggest numbers that most of us will ever work with as individuals. We're not all corporate moguls or business owners. So the house is the biggest thing that we transact over the course of our lifetime. We do it 4 or 5 or 6 times. We're all looking for some safety and security. And if we hear rate enough, rate has been oversold by the mortgage business way too much because it's something that a person who is thinking simplistically about a transaction can understand. 4 is better than 5. 3 is better than 4. And so rate is sold, and it's oversold, and it's sold dishonestly by the mortgage business, number 1, and it's sold dishonestly by the real estate business, number 2, because it's a simple measure that sounds sexy and tempting. And we joke in the mortgage business about, somebody calls up and says, "Hey, what's your rate on a 30-year fix today with 20% down?" And the true answer, the honest answer, sounds a little smart alecky, but it's absolutely 100% honest, is what do you want your rate to be today?
Hmm?
What are you looking for? Because we can get you any rate that you want virtually, almost. I mean, you get into this ridiculous scenarios, but we can go deep in the rate sheet and apply discount points and get you a rate that's so far below market that everybody in your life will be impressed that you're such a financial genius that you got this rate, until they look behind the scenes and see what you paid for it.
Yeah.
And I tell, there's a couple of stories that I tell. I won't get into the details of them, but I literally had a guy come into my office when I was working at a bank years and years ago, and he told me that he wanted this particular rate on a 10-year fixed. And I said, well, you can get that rate, but you're not actually going to save enough money to offset the cost of it if you pay this house off in 10 years.
Right.
And he said, I don't care. I want that rate. So I figured the best sense that I could make out of it was that this guy was trying to beat his brother-in-law. And that was the only thing that made any sense, or he's going to go down to the plant and brag that he got this rate in this market. And nobody else could ever come close to that, because it was a ridiculous expenditure of money. And there was no return on investment except some sort of bragging rights. So it's interesting when you really are able to look behind the curtain. Rates are a kind of a lazy and unsophisticated way to look at the market. And getting into what I think where we're going with number one too, it's a reinforcing factor. If I don't want to do something, I can always blame rates. I can always look at that and say, oh, rates are too high. Rates are too high. Or the reason, and you see this oversold in the business, the reason you should buy now is rates are coming down. Rates are lower. Marry the house and date the rate. All of that stuff, you got to look behind the curtain.
It's funny because I used to be in a call center, and when you get those smart aleck people, which I get it, I was the annoying guy on the other end of a dialer, 100% get it. I would hate me too, to be honest with you. But when somebody would, say like, yeah, what's your rate? Because that was always the thing. We'd get to the point where if he had that tone or she had that tone or they were acting a certain way, we would do the same. We wouldn't be as nice though, because our answer would be, if it was based on today, we would say anything 4.5 to 12. Which one you want?
Mm-hmm.
And they're so blown away. What do you mean 4.5 to 12? And then of course the obvious answer is, okay, well, what's the 4.5? But it would at least get them talking.
Right.
Well, what does the 4.5 cost? About $40,000. Oh, that's crazy.
Well,
Well, yeah, of course it is, because the national average is 6.6 right now. So yeah, 4.5 is nuts. What do you want?
But somebody in the right situation could take a rate that was 3 or 4 points higher. I had this one time.
Correct. Yes.
This was somebody who was in the mortgage business prior, would actually work for the Veterans Administration in the mortgage department. And he came in and wanted a rate that was higher, but he had a windfall coming. He was going to pay his house off. So what happened is he got the bank to pay all of his closing costs. 11 months later, he paid his house off. And we did I looked at him. I was like, you know what you're doing here, brother, because you're trying to beat the bank. And he said, oh, I'm going to beat the bank. And he knew exactly what he was doing. Very unique set of circumstances. And he did it in a way that was, we did the cost analysis, and he made about $8,000 on the bank just by doing that and paying off in less than a year. So again, look behind the curtain.
And not to get, this is a topic for another day, but I think it would be interesting to dive into it, is when the generation of my rate was 18% on my house back in the Jimmy Carter days, when those people, pass on, the houses get paid for, that doesn't exist. Those stories aren't told anymore.
Right.
The next set of stories is going to be my rate was anywhere from 2.5% to 6-7%.
Mm-hmm.
So I do wonder sometimes, like, what the rate conversations will be down the road, when you look back, because we still hear those stories. My rate was this, my rate was that. And you're right. Everybody gets so locked in on rate. And right now people are saying, oh, my neighbor got 3% a couple years ago. And it almost makes you feel worse that you're taking whatever the market rate is today. which is
Right.
6.5, 7, whatever it is on the national average. So it's kind of interesting, and I'm curious. That's a long play, but just how that narrative and that
Mhm.
story is going to impact things down the road. So, all right, let's get to number one, which it's a perfect segue into this because it's talking about stories and whatnot, and that is listening to the wrong messages. So here's 30, 60-second rant on all this, right? Real quick. And then there are going to be so many spinoffs of this one topic or this one
Right.
bullet point here for our shows in January that it's really going to be so focused on math and education and understanding what you're trying to decide between and looking at it from all angles. And listening to the wrong messages. That doesn't always mean the wrong people. That was actually what this bullet point was going to be before. But it's the wrong message and how you decipher what is the wrong message and what's the right message and who's telling you what the right and the wrong message is and what is their motive and can they even explain it or are they just spouting it or can they actually break it down and show you in their opinion why their message is right or why their message is wrong. But mentally, we just have people who we trust. And some people know what they're talking about or have the education or the experience or the wherewithal to be able to step back and look at something and say, this is a good idea, or I don't know about this one, or this is a bad idea. But we kind of get lost in this. Oh, the story's kind of like my house was 17% or I got 3% or no, you should wait because rates will come back down. And well, my buddy, the plumber got this rate or, my friend lost her entire savings because she bought it the wrong time.
Right.
Or this person's a multimillionaire because they got lucky on one house and it exploded 200% over 4 years. And then they sold that and bought something else and flipped that. And here they are today. And a lot of times you just hear the stories or you hear the message with no context. And then you're getting what really you don't even know if it's the right message or the wrong message because a lot of times it's not explained.
Right.
So to me, it's all about that. This is number one because, and it circles back to the analysis paralysis piece because people get so much information and they truly don't know who to trust. And a lot of it too can be blamed on honestly family and friends because
Mhm.
you get in those situations where it's like, well, mom and dad grew up believing this is the only way to retirement and to build wealth and to do this and do that. And maybe they weren't wrong, but they were wrong in the fact that it was the only way.
Right.
So then it becomes a trust game. Who do you trust? And if you're working with me, we've probably known each other for a total of a few hours of talking over the phone. Maybe we
Mhm.
met in person, maybe we met on Zoom, but there's just that trust element, right? And then you're balancing trust and messaging and who's delivering what, and who's coming up with what angle and what reasoning. And to me, though, this and number three are really tied together in a lot of ways, just because the messaging just creates a lot of convoluted space in people's brains.
Right. Well, it's so easy. It's so easy. Think about the term influencer in social media. It's so easy to be influenced in this world because we've got so many messages coming from so many different sources. And
Yeah.
as I'm a kid growing up, you had, three television stations and they were kind of all talking about the same news. And there wasn't all of this input. You had input from your family and your friends. And even that was relatively limited. So our world and our exposure to ideas and thoughts and philosophies and theories massively expanded, and that's both a good thing and a bad thing. And I think about one of my stories about charisma, Chad, is that I had an interaction one time with a politician some years back that I absolutely despised their history and the way that they had conducted themselves in office, and I had occasion to engage them personally in a social setting and was absolutely charmed and enamored with them after engaging with them 5 minutes on an interpersonal basis. And I walked away from that interaction saying, holy smokes, that the impact of charisma and personality and personal energy appeal
Yeah.
is remarkable. And it wasn't that there was nothing but this raw charisma that had completely made me pivot in my perception of this person. And I walked away thinking, that is an extraordinarily dangerous individual. And as it turns out, they were
True.
dismissed from office in shame, in a gigantic scandal. So was I right? I'm not saying I was right or wrong. What I'm saying is that I walked away with this. Wow. I mean, I've got to be really careful about what's coming into my brain, because in that case, I was a better judge from afar than I was up close, and I understood how that person gained so much influence. So, we all know the personalities, the Diana Oliks, the crash cult people who talked all the way through the last 5 years saying real estate's going to crash, it's going to crash, it's going to crash, it's going to crash, and it's done nothing but go up. We still see these messages about the median home prices decreasing up to a couple of months ago, and it's been one of my hot topics in my content. Median home price is not home value, and it's been promoted as such that home prices are coming down, home prices are coming down, home prices are coming down. Well, there may be some reasons that we've seen median house price go down, but value has gone up, and we're sitting at 5 to 6% annualized this year in one of the hardest economies that we've been in several years. And we're coming off of some years at 20 and 25% appreciation. So we just got to be really careful about the messages that we receive and who we're receiving it from and how we react to them, and saying, wow, yeah, I believe what the crash cultists are saying, because that's a really convincing argument. But what's in the data? What is in the data? And the data has run very contrary to a lot of the negative messages that we've seen. But we've also got to watch for this silly over promotion that happens in the industry too, that you've got to buy now or there's going to be no houses left. There's some merit to both sides and being cautious, but also kind of bringing some boldness to whatever decision it is that you're looking at, and watching your fear factor.
Yep. 100%. So again, our top 3: analysis paralysis, focusing too much on rates, and then listening to the wrong messages. And there's a lot of them out there. You got to find people's motives. You got to find, their reasoning, understand. And truthfully, this has always been my approach anyway, is I don't need to make your decision for you, because I don't need you coming back at me in 2 years when maybe things go south and being pissed off.
Right.
Because odds are, when 2 years from now, if things are great, I don't get like a share of equity or a pat on the back.
Right.
I just get it doesn't work that way. It's always when I'm wrong. But really, you should be looking at people who make you think a little bit and present 2, 3, 4 options and possibilities and the pros and cons. And well, if this happens, here's what it could look like, and then here's what this could look like, and kind of giving you some thought, and then letting you make an adult decision. That's kind of always the way I've preached, and really the way it should be. Nobody should talk you in to buying a house or talk you into a certain loan. It should be options presented and then move from there. So, all right.
I think it's always fair too, Chad, to
Yeah.
ask people about their track record.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
Dave Ramsey, love him or hate him, says don't take financial advice from broke people. If you're taking advice about the viability of a home refinance from your cousin at the family reunion who doesn't own a house, and he's spouting some rule that you have to save 2% on a refinance, you probably ought to check the source and find somebody who can do the math and has some experience doing that and winning. So,
although Dave is a smart guy and obviously a multi-millionaire, what also cracks me up about him saying that is that Dave's filed bankruptcy before.
He was broke. He certainly broke at one time. He was broke as a joke one time.
Look, I've had to file in my life too. It happens. It happens. But that doesn't mean you should never listen to that person. Because honestly, somebody like me and really somebody like Ramsey
The
is
lessons, right?
we've actually been through it.
Yeah,
We can
the
tell you
lessons
the
are
good
good.
and the bad. Yeah,
Yeah,
how to do it, what's good, what's bad, how to come out on the other side of it, how to get through it mentally.
right.
There's all kinds of things. So yeah, that's a very black and white statement from him if he depending on how
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
translated or or put out there. All right, that's it for us. Hope you guys had a wonderful Christmas holiday season. Happy New Year. We'll get going again in January and got a lot, like we talked about, a lot of cool deciphering and math and figuring out numbers and educating and showing you
Right.
guys some different things that are going to come up, because if 2024 is as hot as a lot of people are anticipating, it's not a guarantee obviously, but anticipating, you're going to want to know these numbers because you're going to need to make quick decisions at that point. You're not going to have time to mull it over. It's going to be a lot faster
Yep.
in the upcoming year. So everybody have a great rest of your day. We'll catch you next week.